everyone and welcome back. I'm Diane Deziel and today I'm showing you how to make the pattern of a raglan sleeve without the shoulder seam. So to do the raglan sleeve without the shoulder seam, you first select the block you're going to use. Here I use my little knit block for kids, but it would be the same technique if you do women's pattern or men's pattern. That raglan sleeve without the shoulder seam, it's better to do it with knit fabric. Now we're going to retrace the bodice on another paper. If the armhole that you have is already pretty straight and pretty low at the underarm, you could leave it like that. If not, and you have a pretty normal armhole, I suggest you do that little correction that we will do. The correction will do exactly the same way for both back and front. So 90 degrees from the center, you're going to trace and go out about 5 millimeters. Now 90 degrees from that new point, you're going to go down about 1 centimeter. And that's going to be your new underarm point. Now we're going to retrace the armhole and just a little bit the top part of the side seam. For sure it's going to be a curved line and we're going to reach pretty much the notch area. As you could see, the line is a little straighter than the original, and that's why we did that little modification. Then you're going to take your French curve and retrace the top part of the side seam. Here, remember that you could look at the number and use the same number when you do your other side. Now that the armhole is changed, we're going to measure the inside line, so the seam line. You stop at the intersection both at the underarm point and at the shoulder, and you're going to take the measurement of your armhole. For this example, I did got the same measurement for back and the front. We're not going to use the sleeve that goes with my bodice. We're going to do a brand new sleeve because we want a more flat head sleeve. Now you're going to take a new piece of paper to do the sleeve and fold it in the middle. And we're going to use the sleeve just to mark the length of the sleeve. Remember that if you have seam allowance, you have to go down from the seam allowance value. And if you have a hem, remove the value of the hem. And this is the sleeve length. Now we're going to place the measurement of the sleeve, keeping the more space on the top part or where it's going to be the sleeve head. Now from the top point, we're going to go down and trace the bicep line at about 2 centimeters down from that point because I want a very flat head sleeve. Now you're going to take your armhole measurement. It's quite possible that they're different back and front. So you're going to add them up, then divide by 2 so you have an average. Now that you have your half armhole measurement, you're going to place that measurement right on the top point that we found for the sleeve head. So you place it on and you pivot your ruler until the 0 touch the new bicep line that we trace. When it's in position, you indicate and you trace that diagonal line. Now that we have the width at the bicep level, we're going to take the sleeve block again and we're going to get the wrist measurement. Don't forget to measure from the seam line. Then we take that measurement that we just found and we're going to place it at the bottom of the sleeve, 90 degrees from the fold of the paper, and we trace that measurement. Now we're ready to trace the underarm seam. If you don't want the sleeve to get wide too fast, you could just start at the wrist level. Keep your ruler a little bit inside the underarm point. You trace for a little while, then move the ruler, trace some more, and then hold it again and trace the final part until the underarm point. Now with the tracing wheel, you're going to trace, indicate the width at the bicep, trace your underarm seam and the wrist. Then we open the paper and we trace the second side of the sleeve. Now we're going to do a little curve for the sleeve head, and this time, because it's so flat, we're going to do exactly the same thing on both sides. So you're going to divide each side by 2 and then again by 2. Usually the measurement to go up and down is 1 down and 1 up, but since my sleeve is so flat, I'm going to reduce it to about 5 millimeter up and 5 millimeter down. Now this 5 millimeter I'm talking about is not so important. It could be a little less, a little more. The important is that your point that goes down doesn't go below the bicep line. And for the one that goes up, what's important is that it doesn't go higher than the 90 degree from the sleeve head. So I'm going to place a little point down about 5 millimeter from the first quarter and one going up at the last quarter, and I'm going to do it on both sides. Now we're going to trace it from underarm to the bottom point here, touching the middle, the top point, and going to the center top of the sleeve. And we'll do it on the other side the same way. Now I just traced my center line so you could see better. Now what we're going to do is trace the raglan line on the bodice piece. The basic raglan sleeve is usually starting in the neck at about the first third from the shoulder on back and front. So we just mark the first third on both. Then we're going to trace the line connecting the 1/3 at the neck to pretty much the notch level with a very light curve, and we're going to do the same way front and back. Here, to have a nice raglan seam, it's important that it's a continuous line from the underarm point all the way to the neck. Now, using your bodice again, what we're going to do is overlap the shoulder seam one over the other. Remember, seam line, just like that. And when they're in position, you could pin them together, maybe 2 pins, so we could move it easily. Now that they're attached, we're going to be able to place it over the sleeve plan. I'm going to align the shoulder line right on the center line of my sleeve. And you remember that the sleeve doesn't have the seam allowance, but the bodice does. So I'm going to move it on that line until the seam line at the notch area touch my seam line of the sleeve. So I'm moving it down. Now I just check a little more. Now notch level, seam line, touch the seam line of my sleeve. I hold it like that and I could trace my raglan sleeve on the front, raglan sleeve on the back until the notch level. Indicate the notch level, both sides, and trace the neck part of the raglan. Now we're going to look at the raglan sleeve. And for the sleeve, we just have to add the seam allowance all around. Now I'm going to cut all the raglan area for my sleeve, and I'm also going to cut on the bottom line of the sleeve. Once the top and the bottom are cut, you could fold on the hemline. Then I'm going to fold in the middle so I could cut my underarm seam. This way we did the jog for the sleeve hem in the same time. Here I almost did a little mistake with the seam allowance. I ask you to do the seam allowance all around the top part, but we already had it at the neck on the bodice. So now I'm going to ask you to remove this seam allowance of the neck. Then on the bodice, I'm going to remove the pins. Then we're going to put the seam allowance over the raglan seam for back and front. We just have to cut on that sewing value line. That's it, we're finished the pattern for the bodice and the sleeve of the raglan without any shoulder seam. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching and I see you next time.